Welcome in to episode 37 of the PrintFest DFS podcast. My name is Justin Rue, and Scott is not here. He's out gallivanting, doing God knows what, God knows where. But I'm here to break down the Week 7 main slate on Draftkings. I'm going to be talking about my favorite plays in cash games. In other words, the most optimal players to be playing. And I am not a GPP bro. If you're looking for the tournament takes, that is not me. I am here to talk about the best plays on the slate. Starting at the quarterback position, I think Lamar Jackson is going to project as the best point per dollar play on the slate and also one of the top raw points players on the slate at 7,400 at home, taking on Cincinnati with a 26.5 implied total. He's averaging 27.9 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. He has a 10.9 ADOT, so he's throwing the ball deep down the field. He's averaging 61 rushing yards per game. So he's doing everything that we want out of our quarterbacks. He's throwing it deep. He's running the ball. He's playing well. He's taking on a Cincinnati defense that historically he's shredded. But this season so far, Cincinnati is only allowing 6.5 yards per attempt, and they are 8th DVOA and 8th in EPA allowed per dropback. So this is, so far, Cincinnati's been a top half pass defense, but this is not a spot to run away from if you're looking to buy in on Lamar at 7,400. So I think he's the best quarterback play on the slate. I think the second best quarterback play on the slate at 5,700, giving you a nice discount here, is Matt Ryan. In a fast-paced game against Miami, Miami's pass defense has really been kind of falling apart. Matt Ryan's on the road, but at least he has a 25 implied total. They are expected to win this game. And the biggest thing with Matt Ryan, he's just throwing the ball so much more. And the Falcons are averaging 42.3 pass attempts per game over their last 5. And the nice thing about Miami, their opponent, is they are also just completely abandoning the run. I mean, their pass rate over expectation is top 5 in the NFL right now. And so this could be a game where there's not a lot of running. Both teams are throwing a lot. Could end up being a shootout, a fast-paced, back and forth game here. And Miami, on the defensive end, they've allowed 8.0 yards per attempt, 23 DraftKings points per game to opposing quarterbacks. And they're 26th DVOA and they're 28th in EPA allowed per dropback and do not get much pressure at all. So Matt Ryan at 5,700, I think he makes a great stacking partner with Calvin Ridley, who I'll get to later. But, Matt Ryan offers basically nothing with his legs, which is not great, but 5,700 is extremely cheap for this matchup. He's coming off of back-to-back games where he was a QB1. He's thrown multiple touchdowns in each of his past 4 games. Miami has allowed 2+ touchdowns in every game versus quarterbacks that are not rookies. So, this is a nice spot for Matt Ryan, and he's a little bit too cheap. I think that his proper price is probably around 6,400. So he's probably around 6,700 too cheap in this matchup. Let's also touch on Matt Stafford. He's been absolutely crushing. He's up at 7,100. I prefer Lamar Jackson to Matt Stafford, but Matt Stafford at home against the Lions, that's about all you need. They have a 33 implied total. He's averaging 34.8 pass attempts per game, so the volume should be there. He's averaging 23.6 DraftKings points per game. He's playing extremely well with an 8.8 yards per attempt. And taking on Detroit, they are just like the stone worst pass defense. They allow 9.8 yards per attempt, 25, or they rank 25th in DVOA, 32nd in EPA allowed per dropback. They get almost no pressure. 4 touchdowns is in the cards for Matt Stafford in this spot. They just don't stop throwing even when they're winning. He got taken out in the game in the fourth quarter last week against the Giants, so they were blowing them out 38-3. Could happen again here, but if that happens, he's probably already done his damage. So, in 3 games at home this season, Matt Stafford has averaged 315 yards and 3 touchdowns per game. So, this is just another blow-up spot for Matt Stafford. Moving over to the running back position, I think obviously, the guy that we're all going to be jamming in again is like the Gale Sayers of our generation, the Bo Jackson of our generation, and it's it's Derrick Henry, and he's just so hard to get away from. He's not going to project out as the best, point per dollar value on the slate, but with his ceiling, he's going to be extremely hard to get away from. I mean, he's up there at 9,200 and he doesn't have much role in the passing game, but he's at home. This is the highest total game on the slate. He has a 25.5 implied total due to the Titans. They are 5.5 point dogs, but they're taking on Kansas City. And Kansas City allows 4.8 yards per carry against them. They are 31st DVOA against the run and 31st in EPA allowed per carry. I mean, Derrick Henry is averaging 34.9 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. He's averaging 31.6 touches per game, only 2.8 targets for an 8.6% target share. So, like I mentioned, the targets really aren't there. I think the only bear case you can have on Derrick Henry in this spot is that he's really expensive and they're dogs. And so if they go down in this spot, does Henry stay in and does he start getting involved in the passing game? I think it's kind of yet to be seen. He has had an increased role in the passing game compared to the past couple years that he's had in the NFL. This is his most voluminous role that he's had so far in the passing game, but still only 2.8 targets and 8% target share. That's just not going to get it done. He needs to be scoring 2 touchdowns in this spot and going over 100 rushing yards to get there at 9,200. He needs to put up about 27 DraftKings points to get there. He's going to be projecting for anywhere between 24 to 26 DraftKings points in this spot. He is still so hard to get away from just because the state of the running back position is so bad. But I think he's a total smash, 9,200. But you can see the spots where he does fail. If Tennessee goes down by 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, it could be 10 time for Derrick Henry. I think the best running back play on the slate, point per dollar, is Darrell Henderson. At home, taking on Detroit, like I mentioned with Matt Stafford, 33 implied total, 15-point favorites. He's averaging 18.5 DraftKings points per game. He's 6,600, so he's already averaging about what you need. He's playing 76% of the snaps, 19 touches per game over his last 5, 3.8 targets per game for 11.2% target share, so a little bit more involved in the passing game than his counterpart, Derrick Henry, that I just mentioned. Henderson's averaging 101 yards from scrimmage per game, and he's taking on Detroit defense that allows 4.6 yards per carry, 33 DraftKings points per game to opposing backfields. I mean, Henderson basically has 80% of this backfield, so it's definitely the cards for easily over 20 in the spot. That's what he's projecting for. I think that it's not going to surprise me if he outscores Derrick Henry in raw points. That just won't surprise me at all. In Detroit, is 26 DVOA against the run. This is a home run spot for Darrell Henderson at 6,600. That is extremely hard to get away from. He's yet to finish lower than RB20 in a week this season. It's just so hard to get away from a guy like that as a massive home favorite on an elite offense. Let's talk about Lenny Fournette. He's at home, another home massive total, massive favorite, 6,400. So $200 cheaper than Darrell Henderson, taking on Chicago. Fournette over his last 5 games has played 58% of snaps, 17.8 touches, 4.6 targets per game on 11% target share, 97 yards per game. So the production is extremely similar to Darrell Henderson, averaging 17.3 DraftKings points per game. So as far as his past production over the last 5, it's extremely similar. Over the last 3 games, Leonard Fournette's really kind of starting to take control of this backfield. He's had 3 straight top 15 scoring weeks amongst running backs. And also over the last 3 weeks, he's had 72% of the running back touches, and he's had 138, 110, 127 total yards per game. So his production's really been on the rise the last couple of weeks. He's averaging 2 opportunities inside the 10 per game. And with that kind of usage inside the 10 on a team that's going to be scoring probably 4 touchdowns, maybe 5 in this spot, it's extremely hard to get away from. The matchup is pretty middling here against Chicago. They allow 4.4 yards per carry, 21 DraftKings points per game to opposing backfields, but they're 23rd DVOA, and they're 22nd in EPA allowed per rush. So it's a pretty middling matchup. But having this massive total, being at home, being massively favored by over 10 points is just it's a really a nice smash spot for Fournette to rack up a bunch of touches, probably score a touchdown here. 6,400, a little bit too cheap. I would probably price Leonard Fournette around the 7K range. Let's touch on a couple more running backs here. DeAndre Swift, we know what role this guy has. Obviously, he's taking on the Rams, not a great matchup, but they're completely massive dogs. We know that DeAndre Swift basically scores all of his fantasy points through the air. He's had at least 4 receptions and 5 targets in every game this season. So he gives you that nice reception floor, which is exactly what you need. He's playing 69% of the snaps over his last 5 games. He's averaging 6.2 targets per game for an 18.6% target share. Would not surprise me if he led Detroit in targets in this game. And, they're 15-point dogs. I mean, they're going to be down. He's just going to get all the targets. He's averaging 16.9 DraftKings points per game over his last 5, and he's only 6K. So if he scores you, 17 points, like he has been over the last 5, that's basically getting you there. He's too cheap for his role in the passing game. We know DraftKings is full PPR. It's unlikely that he gets there, getting the 100-yard bonus. That's pretty unlikely, but the matchup is pretty middling, and we know they're going to be getting stomped in the second half. And Swift, as long as they're not down by like 30 points going to the fourth quarter, Swift should be able to just rack up all the garbage time, prevent defense, dump offs underneath. Jared Goff stinks. And he just kind of gets there every week. So I love DeAndre Swift at 6K. One more guy in this middle tier of pricing range at running back, we have to talk about Darrell Williams. And so playing on the Chiefs, CEH is out. 31, another running back with a massive implied total. Do the Chiefs have 31? And they are 5.5-point favorites on the other side of this game with the Tennessee Titans. Now, Darrell Williams, I mean, in his start last week, he played 72% of the snaps, had 24 touches, 4 targets for an 8.7% target share, and he had 89 yards from scrimmage. He got into the box twice. So he is their goal line back, and being the goal line back on a Kansas City Chiefs offense as their 5.5-point favorites with 31 implied total at 5,800, Tennessee, they allow 4.6 yards per carry, 21st DVOA and 26th in EPA allowed per carry. Darrell Williams is too cheap at 5,800. He should be 6,500, 6,700. I think that there's 5 main running backs, and I touched on all of them. They're going to be in play for cash games. Darrell Henderson, Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette, DeAndre Swift, and Darrell Williams. Moving over to wide receiver, let's touch on the top end first, right? So we have Devontae Adams, we have Cooper Kupp, we have Tyreek Hill. These guys are the top of the pricing tier. They are the cream of the crop. They are probably the best plays on the slate. And so we have to decipher. Obviously, we can't play all 3 of these guys. We're going to have to decipher who we want. So let's start with Cooper Kupp. He's projecting as the best point per dollar play. And he's at home. We talked about everything with Matt Stafford. Everything else applies to Cooper Kupp. So he's got a great quarterback throwing to him. He's averaging 27 DraftKings points per game over his last 5, 11.6 targets per game for a 34% target share. He's averaging 105 yards from scrimmage per game, 2 red zone targets per game. And he's taking on a Detroit defense that, a touchdown with Matt Stafford, but they allow 11 yards per target to opposing wide receivers. That is just by far and away the worst in the NFL. So Cooper Kupp, awesome play at 8,400, taking on Detroit. We get Tyreek Hill. Now, Tyreek Hill has come off a quad injury. He has not practiced on Thursday. We'll see what happens on Friday. Tentatively expecting him to play, but he's averaged 20.9 DraftKings points per game. So, basically 6.1 DraftKings points per game less than Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp is $200 cheaper. So if you're just going off raw production over the last couple games, Cooper Kupp's a better play. But Tyreek Hill, he's averaging 9.6 targets per game for a 24.6% target share. So, Cooper Kupp's averaging about 2 more targets per game and about 10% target share higher than Tyreek Hill. Cooper Kupp's getting more yards per game, And the matchup is about the same. I mean, Tennessee is absolutely terrible against the pass. They allow 9.6 yards per target, and they're 27th DVOA. So it's another beautiful matchup for Tyreek Hill in this game with a 56 over under. And then we get Devontae Adams, where, I mean, he's just a total stud. We know what he is. With the Packers being at home, Aaron Rodgers at home is always a spot you want to be in. 29 implied total. Devontae Adams is averaging 24.6 DraftKings points per game. So again, Cooper Kupp is still he has been better than Devontae Adams in DraftKings points per game by about 2.5 points per game over the last 5. They're both averaging 11.6, 11.8 targets per game. Devontae Adams has a 38.9% target share over his last 5. That is, about 4.5 points higher than Cooper Kupp. He's averaging 122 yards per game over his last 5. That's about 20, or actually about 15 yards higher than Cooper Kupp. And he's taking on a Washington defense that's 30th in EPA allowed per dropback, 28th DVOA. They allow 8.6 yards per target. So it's another beautiful spot for Devontae Adams at 8,900. So, it kind of depends on which one of these top 3 guys fits into your builds, but they're all in play. I prefer Cooper Kupp, then Adams, then Tyreek if paying up at the position. Let's touch on Rashad Bateman down at 3,400. He's going to be the punt play. If Sammy Watkins is out, I think that Rashad Bateman is probably a lock for cash games at home, 26 implied total. He's got a great quarterback throwing in the ball with Lamar Jackson averaging 7.7 completion percentage over expected over his last 5 games. So, Lamar is having an amazing season. And Bateman, he caught 4 of 6 targets for 29 yards in his rookie debut last week. He played 65% of snaps and he ran a route on 67% of Lamar's dropbacks. But he had a 22% target share, which is really pretty solid. He only had a 7 ADOT, so he's getting these slants over the middle of the field. But he's moving the chains on all 4 of his receptions. They were all first down. So, this is I love the Rashad Bateman as a prospect coming out of Minnesota. 3,400 is too cheap if Sammy Watkins remains out. And if Rashad Bateman is going to be commanding 22% of the targets in an elite offense and taking on a Cincinnati defense that allows 70% catch rate to opposing wideouts, I think this is a spot where Rashad Bateman can just, collect 6-7 targets, have a nice catch rate on those targets, probably catch, 4 to 6 balls here at 3,400. I like him a lot. Let's touch on a couple more guys here in the mid-range, and let's hit up Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is 6,600. He's had 7+ catches in 3 straight games with double-digit targets in all 3 of those games. He has a 27.1% target share in games played this season, and he's wide receiver 3 in expected fantasy points per game. So he's averaging, let's go back to this comparison between Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp. Calvin Ridley is $2K cheaper than both of these guys, and he's averaging 11.3 targets per game. Cooper Kupp's averaging 11.6. Devontae Adams 11.8. So right on pace with them in targets per game. 28% target share, a little bit lower than Kupp and Adams, but still a 0.75 weighted opportunity rating. So that's actually 1 point lower than Cooper Kupp. So he's right there with Cooper Kupp. Problem is his yards just haven't been there. He's just not converting on his targets. And so I like to follow volume and follow the targets, and eventually the production will follow. We mentioned this is a fast-paced game here against Miami, and Calvin Ridley's still involved in the red zone. So, taking on Miami, they allowed 9.4 yards per target. They're 28th in EPA allowed per dropback, 26 in DVOA against the pass. 6,600 is too cheap for Calvin Ridley, where, his ADOT has came back up. It's 10.3. That's an alpha ADOT. That's not someone, like, Hunter Renfro getting like a, 5 or 6 ADOT. It's not like, Jalen Waddle getting a 5 ADOT. This is a guy getting downfield. And Calvin Ridley was a total smash, like basically every week last year. 6,600 is too cheap for Calvin Ridley. I expect him to be extremely high owned in this game. The last guy we got to touch on is AJ Brown at 6,300, $300 cheaper than Calvin Ridley at home. Extremely high total in this game at 56, taking on Kansas City. We know Tennessee's probably going to be trailing. They have a 25.5 implied total. Ryan Tannehill's playing decently well, averaging 1.6 completion percentage over expected. So he's got a decent quarterback throwing the ball. It's not like he's Terry McLaurin having Taylor Heineke out there. It's not like he's, DJ Moore having Sam Darnold back there. So he has a competent quarterback. And over his last 2 games where he's been healthy, he's averaging 32.3% of the targets and 7.5 targets per game. Julio Jones is questionable in this game. The only thing with A.J. Brown is apparently he had some bad Chipotle and he's still throwing up from him. And apparently he's lost quite a few pounds. So, he's not going to be full strength in this game. But, it's just Kansas City just stinks so bad. I mean, they're 31st DVOA, 27th in EPA allowed per drop back. They allow 8.4 yards per target to opposing wide receivers. Tennessee's going to have to throw. They're going to have to throw. If Julio Jones is out, A.J. Brown's a total stud. Hopefully he can get healthy and get back out there. But 32% of the targets in a game where they're going to have to throw probably 35 to 40 times against Kansas City, it's hard to fade A.J. Brown. I always love this guy. He's basically back to full strength as far as with his hamstring injury since he returned. He's ran around on 92% and 89% of dropbacks. So he is basically back to full health, with his hamstring injury. All right, guys, moving back to tight end. We have to go back to RSJ. RSJ only moved up to 3,700. 3,700 for a guy basically playing 100% of snaps. The last couple of games, he's played 99% of snaps and 100% of snaps. He's run the third most pass routes, 78. Third most pass routes among all tight ends in the NFL. And 3,700. I mean, you're basically getting Logan Thomas usage at 3,700. I mean, yeah, he's got a terrible quarterback throwing the ball with Taylor Heineke. But, he's still averaging 15.8 targets per game, 15.8% target share. My apologies. 6 targets per game, 39 yards per game, 0.7 red zone targets per game. So he's actually involved in the red zone. And we know that Washington's going to have to throw all day. They're like 9-point dogs in the spot, taking on Green Bay. But Green Bay, they allow 7.1 yards per target to opposing tight ends. They allow 13.7 Draftkings points per game to opposing tight ends. If you give me 13.7 Draftkings points at 3,700, I will gladly take that. They allow a 78.6% catch rate to opposing tight ends. That's second worst in the NFL. So they could potentially be vulnerable over the middle of the field. And Ricky Seals-Jones in a game where they're going to have to throw. 3,700, he's going to be on the field for seemingly every snap. I think he's an awesome play. The only other tight end that I want to mention here is Cole Kmet. And Cole Kmet, over the last 2 weeks, he's had 20% target share in the Chicago offense. He's played 85% of snaps over his last 5. He has a 10.5 ADOT, so he's getting targets downfield. He's not just getting these underneath routes. He's only averaging 3.4 targets per game, but that's just because, Chicago is not throwing. If we look at Justin Fields, look at how many times he's thrown per game over his last 5. He's only thrown the ball 21 times per game, in the games that he's played. So, I mean, they're going to have to throw. They're taking on Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is going to be all over them. They're going to be on them. They're 12.5-point favorites. So they're going to have to be throwing. Chicago, Cole Kmet is 3K. Yeah, he doesn't have much touchdown upside. He's got a terrible quarterback throwing the ball. I believe in Justin Fields long term, but right now, I mean, his completion percentage over expected is -8 on average over his last 5 games. So, I mean, that is just horrible. He's really been inefficient, having a lot of problems throwing the ball. This could be a game where Chicago just gets completely washed off the map and goes 3 and out every possession with Tampa Bay's strong pass rush. But Tampa Bay has been struggling against opposing tight ends. They allow 16.5 Draftkings points per game and a 78% catch rate. And, they're 18th DVOA against the pass, 18th in EPA allowed per drop back. Cole Kmet, if you need the salary savings, if you can't get up to Ricky Seals-Jones at 3,700, then Cole Kmet at 3K. If he gets 16% of the targets in a game where they're probably going to have to throw the ball, 30 times, it sets up well for a guy who's 3K. Unlikely to score a touchdown, but he has a deep enough ADOT where if he can collect, 6 targets in this game, if you give me 60 air yards for a guy who's 3K against a pretty bad pass defense, I'm willing to go in on that. So these are 2 punt tight ends. I'm not really looking to pay up for tight end. You get Mark Andrews up there. He's up over 6K. Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, all these guys, they just don't really fit the build for cash games and building optimal lineups. So with that, that's going to do it for episode 37 of the PrintFest DFS podcast. I think I provided a ton of value in a short amount of time, kept it as short as I could, ran through my favorite plays at the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position, all within probably about 30 minutes. Hopefully, guys, got something out of this. If you did, leave us a like, drop us a follow on Twitter, and until next time, good luck, everybody.